Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 49 is a bill that excludes mandatory overtime from pension spiking provisions. For those of you that are around in 2013, you probably remember when the General Assembly passed that, and it's been amended several times since. It was originally designed to mitigate the impact of members who, in the last few years of their employment, intentionally and voluntarily worked significant amounts of overtime to boost their creditable compensation on which their pension was based. In 2018, it was amended to create a look-back period and limited spikes above 10% to their 5-year average compensation. There is a sub on this, and I move passage of the sub.
Clerk, please report House Committee Substitute 1.
House Committee Substitute 1 to House Bill 49.
Motion is for the adoption of House Committee Substitute 1. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor signify by voting aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. House Committee Substitute 1 is adopted. Gentleman from Jefferson, 36.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The genesis of this bill was related to, in May of 2020, civil unrest, including demonstrations and rioting caused by the untimely death of Ms. Breonna Taylor, caused Mayor Greg Fisher to declare a state of emergency and order LMPD to work mandatory 12-hour on, 12-hour off shifts. And while the governor, on the 30th of May, sent in the National Guard, he did not declare a state of emergency, which would have qualified the mandatory overtime as an appropriate exemption from the spiking provision. In other areas, various situations caused local officials, such as the recent tornadoes, to dictate mandatory overtime for their employees without qualifying, sometimes without qualifying for a state of emergency declaration. What this bill does is in Section 1(4)(e)(2) creates an exemption for mandatory overtime worked above 100 hours per fiscal year. Essentially, that's one shift per month. Anything above that, regardless of whether it's an emergency or not an emergency, would qualify for an exemption under this provision. Section 1(4)(f)(2) would add the governor mobilizing the Kentucky National Guard as an exemption, regardless if he or she declares a state of emergency. Section 2 makes retroactive the provisions to May 20th, 2020, when the governor sent in the National Guard, and it ends the retroactivity on May 11, 2021, which was when LMPD command stopped mandatory overtime. And then because this affects people who have already retired, Section 3 declares an emergency. If there are no questions, I move passage of House Bill 49 as amended by House Committee Substitute 1.